Hey there, and welcome to the Eighth and Grace podcast. I am your host, Brandy Dawson. Here, we walk alongside each other during every season of life. When it's hard and it's holy, in joy and in grief, when it's light and when it's weighty, when it's peace and there is beauty in the chaos. Because, friend, this is our real life. So you can think of this as a grace space for messy faith. Girl, you are loved and covered by grace. I am Brandy, and this is the Eighth and Grace podcast.
Hey friends, I'm Brandy. Welcome back. You are right on the corner of Eighth and Grace, the place where faith meets the fallout and grace rewrites the story. Today's conversation carries that kind of weight that's not polished, but it's pure. Not easy, but undeniably alive. Feels like standing barefoot on mercy, and like heaven is brushing up against our humanity in real time. This is where pain and purpose start to recognize each other, where redemption takes its shoes off and grace exhales through every word, unhurried, unfiltered, and honest enough to make you breathe different. Because healing rarely happens all at once. It unfolds slowly, like a sunrise after a long night. And it looks like courage showing up in trembling hands, like therapy sessions and tear stained Bibles, like choosing to believe that God is still good, even when life feels impossible. And my guest today, she knows that journey by heart. Kimberly Haar is an LPC and LMFT, a licensed professional counselor, marriage and family therapist, and survivor of domestic violence, whose story reveals the redemptive power of God in the most broken places. With nearly 2 decades of clinical experience, Kimberly helps individuals and families navigate trauma, grief, and emotional healing with both biblical wisdom and evidence-based tools. She's written a book, Healing from Life's Deepest Hurts, and it's part testimony and part counseling guide, a compassionate roadmap for anyone wrestling with grief, trauma, betrayal, and darkness. In it, she weaves her personal testimony of surviving some domestic violence and courageously choosing to speak her truth with her professional insight, guiding readers through the stages of recovery and renewal. Kimberly openly shares how she was assaulted, kidnapped, and witnessed the man she loved being shot 10 times, and yet how God transformed her pain into purpose and joy. Through that lived experience and her clinical expertise, she offers readers and listeners real, practical tools for healing and hope. She's also a co-host on Oasis Radio Network and the founder of a thriving counseling practice in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She brings compassion, biblical wisdom, and nearly 20 years of professional experience to every space she serves. Kimberly believes no story is too shattered for redemption, and that joy can bloom even from the ashes. She opens the door to her own story of pain, survival, and the God who met her there, offering biblical truth and practical therapeutic tools for walking through trauma, grief, and loss. So whether you're listening on your morning drive or sitting somewhere quiet with your coffee and a tender heart, I want you to lean in, because this conversation, it's a slow unfolding of grace. It carries weight and wonder. It's sacred, it's vulnerable, and it's real. I'm going to drop you right in the middle of our conversation. Let's go. Thank you, Jesus. It only took 2 attempts for us to
That's
be able to
right.
have this interview.
That's right.
I had
Well,
already
third time's the first
Oh,
time I
yeah.
think you were in therapy.
Oh,
I,
yeah,
I
you're
texted
right.
you and you were in therapy.
Yeah.
The second time we couldn't hear each other, so third time's a charm.
Third time is a charm. This episode carries weight and wonder. It's sacred, it's vulnerable, and it's real, and it's redemptive. And before we begin, I want to give a gentle note to hold space for anyone listening who carries their own story of trauma, abuse, or loss. This conversation touches on themes of domestic violence and grief. If at any point you need to pause, if you need to breathe or step away, please do so. There is no timeline for healing, and you're safe to take this at your own pace. And if you're in the middle of your own hard story right now, hear this before anything else. You are not alone, and God sees you. And grace holds space for you right here and right now. Today's conversation is with my friend Kimberly. She is a licensed professional counselor, marriage and family therapist, and survivor of domestic violence. Kimberly, welcome to Eighth and Grace. I have been anticipating this one. I have my coffee, my water, my journal, and my pen, so we are going to go there. And like you said, we're going to go there on our third attempt. The third time's a charm. So happy to have you with me today.
I am so honored to be here. I'm excited.
Yes. Before we dive in, I want to know the calling before your story. So before we dive deeper into parts of your journey, I always just love beginning with the becoming and who Kimberly was before you're a counselor, before a marriage and family therapist, a calling that holds so much of other people's pain. What first drew you into this sacred work? And was there a personal moment that made you realize this wasn't just a career, but a calling to help others heal?
You know, I was reflecting on that the other day, and I was talking to my sibling, and I said, I didn't really realize, but I was born into a family where when I was born, I want to say I was part of Healing Hearts, because my mom and dad had a baby that had died at birth 9 months previously or 10 months previously. So even from birth, it was like my existence was a part of bringing hope and healing to hearts. And so I've always been one that has been, looking out for others. I would say I've always been a cheerleader and an encourager for others.
Yeah.
And I became a licensed therapist because in my first marriage, we needed counseling, and we went to some marriage counseling, but I didn't feel like it was really giving me the hope that I needed. So I decided, it was probably now almost 20 years ago, that I was going to go back to school and I was going to become a hope giver. And I think it felt right. It felt like this is really out of my pain, but this is really the calling God was placing on me, was to bring encouragement and hope to others.
Yeah. Wow. That is so beautiful, and it's so powerful. And it's so powerful how God can plant purpose in places we didn't even realize were preparation. Wow. Yeah, that is so beautiful. And, while you were talking, I was thinking, because I've been thinking a lot about this lately with my own journey, right? We all have a journey. We all have a place that we began. We have a messy middle where we are right now, and a place where we're always seeming to be going to, right? But I was thinking, we talk a lot about healing from trauma and joy that is on the other side. But I have truly been sitting in this place wrestling with healing that comes through trauma. Sometimes our healing comes right through the middle of a wilderness place. Sorry, I'm in my office. It's not very soundproof, and we've got some sirens going by. Sorry about that, guys.
Speaking of trauma, somebody's in trauma.
Somebody's in a traumatic experience right now. Lord, be
That's
with
right.
them. Yeah, but I was thinking how we truly experience trauma and we can heal through it. And I don't think that is talked about nearly enough. And that may be why so many people that are in their own situations, no matter what that look like, whether it be grief or loss, and they feel alone. Because we talk about what it looks like on the other side, but not truly. There's not many people that just want to be very vulnerable, right? And tell their heart and what's gone on in their lives, because it's real and it's raw and it exposes you. And once it's out there, it's out there. And now everybody knows, right? I want to talk now, Kim, about the night everything changed.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that you just shared your becoming story, because that was so
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. And I know this next part of your story is incredibly vulnerable, and I want to hold it with gentleness. 4 years after your divorce,
Mm-hmm.
something unimaginable happened.
That's
You were
right.
assaulted,
Mm-hmm.
you were kidnapped.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't even fathom these words as they're coming out of my mouth.
Yeah.
And there's just no way to even talk about this situation just without the tenderness and sacredness of knowing you witnessed your ex-husband shoot the man you love.
I did. Now, I didn't see the bullets hit him, but I was there and then made an escape while my ex-husband was there doing the shooting.
My God. Can you take us into that moment? Not just what happened, but what it felt like to survive. And not to
Yeah.
only survive physically, but what it's been like emotionally and
Yeah.
spiritually.
Yeah. Well, what had happened is, like you said, I had been married 23 years, and after 23 years, I made the decision to divorce. And it was really the hardest decision I've ever made because, when I took my vows, I took them seriously. My first husband had been unfaithful, like with one night stands or pornography or chat rooms. But because we had 4 young children at the time, I made the decision to stay in my marriage. When my youngest children were 15, though, I discovered my ex husband was in an affair. And I knew that I was done. I knew that I could no longer stay in this marriage. And so I divorced my ex husband, but we had a friendly divorce, as friendly as they can be. And I had made the decision I was going to be a single mom for 4 years so I could raise our youngest 15-year-olds, get them off to college because, I think sometimes we're mom first. And
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
so I got them, to where they were starting college and I was empty nesting. I was a single at home. And I just knew that it was time for me to begin living for me again. And in
Yeah.
fact, I think in 2016, I found a journal and I had put in there, if the sky is the limit, I'd like to begin dating again and I'd like to get married again. And so
Yeah.
2017 came around and I woke up and I just felt a stirring in my heart that this was the year I was going to be married again. But I wasn't dating anybody. I didn't know how to date anybody. I hadn't
Right.
dated in 7 years. And so I made the choice to go and I did some online dating. And my 14th first date, I met an amazing man. He was an engineer. His name was Andrew. And almost immediately, we knew that we were just such a good connection. And I knew this was going to be the man I married. And so for the next 30 days, I was like on a high. Everything was wonderful. We had talked about marriage. Even though it was such a short time, we both knew. In fact, I kind of laugh. Andrew had told me, he said, being the engineer, he said he asked Google how long you need to know somebody before you know you're in love.
Isn't that like a man? And
It,
that's like
it,
that's like just the most precious thing. Like, the fact that he was even asking, like,
yeah,
he
he wanted
knew.
to do it right.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
we knew we were headed for marriage. And so during the same time, my ex husband invited me to his apartment one evening. And he began talking to me about wanting me to give him an opportunity to redate, to reconcile. And I told him that I had met somebody and that I had moved on, and he needed to as well. And so when I said that, he looked at me and he said, well, maybe I'm just going to need to go talk to that man. Now, I didn't know what that meant. My ex-husband was not a threatening person. There had never been any domestic violence in our 23 years of marriage, but something just didn't sit right with me. And if I'm honest, I just didn't want him to scare Andrew away.
Right? Because
And
now it's
yes,
like, oh
too
my
soon
gosh,
in the
like, what are you going to do?
relationship, don't be that
Yeah.
ex-husband.
Yeah.
So when I left, I called Andrew and I said, can I come to your home and can I just visit with you just for a little bit? It was like 9 o'clock at night. And I went to his house and I told him about the conversation. And I said, Andrew, would you fight for me? And he looked at me and he said, well, of course I would. He said, you're worth
Oh,
it.
Kim.
And what I didn't know is that it would be less than 24 hours and Andrew was going to be fighting for his life because I went home from there very happy, very settled. And I was getting ready to go to bed. And again, I felt that stirring on the inside of my heart. And it just said, lock your bedroom door. I wasn't scared, but I thought, okay, I mean, for whatever reason. So I got up, locked my bedroom door, and I went to sleep. But at 2:30 in the morning, I woke up to my bedroom door crashing down off the hinges. I woke up to the angry voice of my ex-husband. He was intoxicated. He had a gun in his hand. And for the next 4 hours, I was assaulted. Following the assault, he told me as punishment for ruining his life, I was going to have to witness him murder Andrew. And so he kidnapped me at gunpoint and drove me to Andrew's house. And, throughout this, I'm just thinking, this just feels like such a bad dream I'm going to wake up from. I mean, it just was so unreal. And when we got to Andrew's house, my ex-husband looked at me and he said, now you go do whatever you need to do. And he left the keys in the ignition of the vehicle. So he reached in the back seat of the vehicle, got the gun, got bullets, and I jumped into the driver's seat to make a getaway. But as I was driving away, I heard 3 gunshots. And so I knew that there was no way Andrew was going to survive this morning. It was early morning. I made an escape to a super center. 911 was called. The police and ambulances were dispatched, to both locations. And I was taken to an emergency room, but I would later learn that Andrew had been shot 10 times. He had been shot in the femoral artery. He had lost half his blood. It was touch and go. And his adult son had called my cell phone, and I'd only met him one time, but he said, hey, we're sorry this happened, but we just think you guys need to go your separate ways. And obviously he was protective of his dad, who's this crazy woman he's involved with.
Yeah.
And so I was heartbroken. I think I was more upset about the idea of losing Andrew and the man that I knew I was going to marry than I was about everything that had happened to me physically. And I wouldn't hear from Andrew for like 5 to 6 weeks because he was in and out of surgeries. In the hospital, he was under an assumed name because it was a crime scene. So I had to be patient and I had to wait. But that's kind of where, when I left the emergency room, that's when my healing had to begin.
Yeah.
And, right away, I went to my uncle and aunt's house, who they had a home in the south part of my town. And they were leaving for Canada, and they said, we don't want you to have to go back to your home where you were, because it's no longer a home. And they gifted me their home. And so I walked in their backyard. There was a big, beautiful pergola, and something just told me that they were leaving the next day, but I knew this is where I'm going to meet Jesus in my pain. And so that's really where the whole beginning of my healing began, was underneath this pergola, wrapped in a big green blanket, weeping. And that's kind of where that story begins.
Kimberly, I may have already said this. Like, I'm sitting here in awe with I think the whole time you've been talking, my mouth has been open. It seems more like I am watching like a true crime show, or listening to like a podcast, like the Crime Junkies, like not sitting across from my dear friend and learning about the life and the pain and the trauma that you've endured. I'm almost speechless, and that never happens. And that kind of trauma that you've experienced, like, it shakes everything. Like you said, your healing began wrapped in a blanket out under that pergola with Jesus. It can shake the very foundation.
Sure.
And I'm so grateful that you went to him and not, because you could have went completely opposite the other way. And I'm so thankful that you knew, obviously.
I think that because I was raised, I accepted Jesus when I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
And so I've never known a life apart from him.
Yeah.
And where I had many questions, I had many emotions. I knew I was bringing my emotions to the Lord.
Yeah.
I was going to bring my emotions. It's like I brought my anger to the Lord. I said, God, I'm angry. I
Yeah.
brought my fear to the Lord. I brought my doubt, my questions of why. Why
Yeah.
didn't you stop this? Where were you? And I don't think I even thought about running away from the Lord, although many people do. When
Yeah.
there's hard things, many people run away from God or blame God. And the only thing I knew to do was to run to Him.
Just to rest at his feet. Yeah.
And my very first prayer is I was wrapped in that green blanket and I was weeping, and I didn't know a body could weep so much. And I didn't know because it felt like it was coming out of my mouth. It felt like it was just seeping out of my body, just this
Yeah.
grieving. And my first prayer to the Lord was, God, I'm so empty. I don't even have words to pray. It was like, here I am. I can't even talk to you. But I remembered a scripture in Zephaniah where God says he rejoices over us with singing. And so I asked the Lord, I was like, almost like thinking of Adam and Eve and how God breathed life into their bodies. And I was
Yeah.
like, Lord, I'm asking you to sing over me. And I'm asking you to breathe the life into my broken body. Bring life to me again, because right now I'm a shell.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I was saying it can shake the very foundation. It can shake the foundation of everything you know, everything you thought you knew. It shakes everything that you knew about your own safety, how you felt and how safe you were. It could shake how you feel about love and reframe completely how you see love again and even faith. And yet somehow you kept breathing.
I
Even
did.
though you felt like a shell, you kept breathing, you kept breathing, you kept believing, and you kept rebuilding.
Well, and I tell you what
And
I did in that part of it, in the breathing, and because this is something I get asked a lot, how do you go through these hard things? And sometimes it's just take the next breath.
yeah,
It's you can't see 5 feet in front of you, but it's just take the next breath. And so
yeah,
when I was saying, Lord, just breathe into me, okay, I didn't have words to pray, but I began to play praise and worship music. And I would first just listen to the words, and it was like they would bathe over me. And then one day I had enough words. Now I can actually sing with these. And now these are becoming my prayers. And so that's the part of it's just breathe, and you do just the next right thing, and somehow tomorrow comes.
tomorrow comes. Yeah, yeah, and joy comes in the morning. What would you tell, as we're sitting here talking, I'm thinking if we have any friends and listeners to this point that are thinking, man, that's my story. I can't even imagine that there are. And maybe if it's not to the same depth, but that they've been through such a traumatic experience. When you think back to those first days, like afterward, when you're still in the fog, when you're still in the fear and the questions that never stopped in your mind that never stopped spinning, if you could go sit beside her, that version of yourself, what would you whisper to her?
I think the first thing I would whisper is, you're stronger than you think, and you are going to get through this. But I'd also say, I'm not leaving you, and I'm sitting right beside you, and you're not going through this alone. Because, I appreciate you saying, if somebody has gone through something and says, this is my story, but maybe it's not as dramatic. And, there are no pain Olympics.
Right.
Pain is
Amen.
pain.
Yeah.
My fear is no greater than somebody else's fear. My feelings of betrayal or a loss of security and safety, okay, mine came as a result of something very dramatic. But a lot of times people can be just in relationships with friendships, and all of a sudden it doesn't feel safe to trust people anymore, and my sense of safety is gone.
It's gone.
So
Yeah.
it's really, when it comes to trauma, I like to say, because I am a therapist, I like to say that trauma isn't just what happened to you, it's how something impacts you.
Oh, yeah.
And so
Yeah. That's good.
in that, those first days, one of the first things I did is I made 2 calls. I called my pastor, and I got myself with a good licensed Christian therapist. And because I knew that healing it's not linear. It wasn't going to be like 6 days forward and then 3 more days forward, and then this is great.
Right.
It was
Right.
sometimes it was, 1 day forward, 2 days back. And then it may be 3 days forward, 1 day back.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't linear, and sometimes it would just feel like the waves were crashing in on me. And so I always suggest and tell people, one of the first things to do, make sure you're not walking through this alone. Because when we walk through things alone, first of all, that's exactly where the enemy wants us. That's where Satan wants us to be, is alone, because then we can buy into his lies that say nobody cares,
Yeah.
life will never get better, something may be my fault, whatever lie he's feeding you. And so that's why it's so important to have good, godly, wise counsel around you. And so that's really the very first thing I tell people is, don't do it alone. Let others walk beside you.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you want her to hold on to when everything else feels like it's breaking?
Sometimes it's just holding on to. Let me wait for that.
I don't know. I'm
You're in a bunker.
Girl. Well, we do have a little shelter under our house because our house is so old here in South Carolina. But I have never in my life ever heard whatever that was just go over my house. And so I'm going to say one more time, the devil is a liar. And this conversation is so needed.
Yeah.
And it is going to go forth no matter how many
Yep.
distractions
Yep.
try to come and sound us out and drown out the voices that are going forth. We are going to tell
That's
our
right.
story today.
That's
It's
right.
happening.
That's right.
Goodness, I'm so sorry.
Okay, when you ask me what would I want somebody to hold on to, sometimes all they can hold on to is hope.
Yeah.
They may not see how something's going to happen, but maybe it's just the hope that, you know what, somehow just maybe this isn't the end. Maybe something good is coming. Because if we can have just a spark of hope and you hold on to that, you know what? A little bit more hope comes, and a little bit more hope comes. And that's actually the reason I made the decision to write this book. When you said a lot of us don't tell our stories, it was a really tough decision for me to tell my story, because not because of what happened to me, but because I'm a licensed therapist. And most therapists, we don't tell our stories, we hold other people's stories. But what I have come to see over the past 20 years is, what is so powerful is people come in and what they want to know is, I'm not alone. Somebody else has experienced something hard, and they can say,
right
you know
there?
what?
Yeah.
I'm a step ahead of you, but if I got through it, you can too. And so that's the hope, saying, you know what? If somebody else has gone through something, similar, what I consider worse, the same, it's like, if somebody's gotten through it, maybe I can too.
Yeah. That is so powerful to me. And if I could think of one word that you would have said, that our friend that's listening right now that needed just one word to hold on to, hope is the best one.
That's right.
Hope is the best word that I think that you could have given her, because I can only imagine. I mean, we all, like I said, I've had my own journey, and many of our other friends listening, I'm sure we all have been in a situation to where it could feel hopeless and to where we could feel helpless. And that is exactly where the enemy wants to keep us. I mean, you're so right in that.
Yeah.
If he can keep us alone and isolated, right, then he can keep us in the shame
Yeah.
that covers our face. He can keep us in the doubt, and he can keep us in that this had to be my fault.
That's right.
And it's that cycle that you never can break free from if you lose hope.
That's right.
So that is so beautiful. And I think right now, I'm thinking along the way, in every step of your journey, breathing, holding, rebuilding, the faith that had to be woven, into every step, but also where faith met that fallout. And faith is woven. I mean, I can see it all through your story as you're talking, but I know it wasn't simple. It was never simple. And there's a kind of faith that's like learned in Sunday school, like on Sunday morning. And then there's the kind of faith that's forged in a fire.
That's right.
And when you only know that you came out and you don't smell like the smoke of the fire that you went in. How did your relationship with God? I know it was strengthened, and I know that you leaned on him, But how did it shift at all through that season?
It did because, first of all, I love it that when I brought all my big, ugly, messy emotions to the Lord, He didn't chastise me. And a lot of times I think that's why people run from the Lord, is they think if I tell God I'm angry, He's going to be mad at me or He's going to rebuke me. And I like to use David in the Bible as an example. David said, "Hey God, where are you? It's like you've abandoned me. My bones hurt. My prayers are going up to the ceiling and they're coming back down. Where are you?" So he was really saying, "This is how I feel." But then he would end the Psalms with, "But this is what I know. You are holy. You are righteous. This is what I declare." And so the Lord welcomed me in all my messy emotions, and He didn't tell me I had to feel something. He didn't say, "Yeah, but at least be grateful for this." Let's talk about gratitude, Kim. What can you be grateful for? It was more of His arms wrapping around me saying, I know you're sad. I know this hurts, and I'm here. And lots of times, I think Psalm 23 really became alive to me when it says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil because you're with me." It doesn't say I'm not going to walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And so too many, there's a message that can get heard in Christian circles that say bad things don't happen to Christians. We just rebuke it. We just, have faith for it. We just move on. And it's really, the Bible says you're going to have hard times, so hold on. But here I am. The promise is you're not going to go through it alone. And so my faith really, first of all, it strengthened when I actually felt the love of God and not the rebuke of God. And then in the beginning, I kind of went into control mode. When something hard happens, it's human nature to want to plan, how do I fix this? How do I make this happen? And so I began telling God what I thought He should do, when He should do it, how He should do it. And then I would say, "Oh, but Lord, I trust you."
Yeah.
And so I had to really get real with myself first, and then God. Yeah. And the way that happened is my pastor's wife took me out for coffee one morning, and she said, "Kim, you are making Andrew your idol. You are saying, God, bring him back to me. You're trying to arrange all that, but you're making Andrew your happiness and not Jesus." And she said, and that's a spot that only Jesus is supposed to fill. And we talked about how as women, sometimes we can put our kids in that place, or our ministries, or our spouses, or, all these different things, that this is what brings us joy and fulfillment. And so I went back to the pergola and I prayed and I said, "Lord, I don't want to trust you." I said, "I'm scared to trust you, because what if you don't give me what I want?" And again, those honest prayers, I'm never tried to be fake with the Lord. And I said, but as an act of faith and as a declaration, not of my feelings, because I didn't feel it, as a declaration, I'm going to say, I will choose to trust you no matter the outcome. And what I would do is I heard a song on my playlist because I was playing music, and it was called "Dance With Me, O Lover of My Soul" by Paul Wilbur. And it talked about how the Lord comes and pursues us and woos us and loves us. And so I said, "Lord, as a sign that I am going to trust you," I would put my hands like up in a waltz position, and I would close my eyes, and I would imagine myself being held in the arms of the Lord, and I would waltz to this song. And at the very end of it, I would bow and I would curtsy as if the Lord was there. And I would say, "Lord, this is my sacrifice of praise," because I don't feel like it. Yeah. It's like, but a sacrifice of praise is when you lift your hands and your heart is heavy.
Yeah.
So that's the relationship with the Lord. He just kept wooing me in deeper and deeper and gently. And it was absolutely beautiful.
You truly can say now that you know the truth in that He draws near to the brokenhearted.
He does.
Yeah.
He does.
When it's one thing, and I say this quite a bit, but it's one thing when we know Scripture, we read Scripture, and we can see that He is the mender of hearts. Like we know that. But when you experience Him as the mender of hearts, it's a completely different relationship in
Yeah.
that moment. And it's just a trust that you would have never experienced
Yeah.
before had you not had to know him in that moment. For a woman listening right now that may be whispering, maybe she's too weak, maybe she's too tired to even form a sentence, but she's whispering, yeah, but where was God when it all fell apart?
Yeah.
What would you say to her right now?
Yeah. I would say he was there.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes people will say, where is God when bad things happen? But
Mm-hmm.
it's really not a question. They're saying it as an accusation, as if,
Mm-hmm.
God, you weren't there.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you where God was in my specific instance. God was there the night before when I was having a stirring in my heart that said, lock your bedroom door. Because had I not locked my bedroom door, I really believe I would have died.
Yeah.
And so because there is human will, you know, God gave man and woman human will and free
Yeah.
will.
Mm-hmm.
And so my ex-husband had free will. And so God was there in saying, hey, lock your bedroom door. Because from the moment my door crashed down off the hinges, I was awake. I was alert. It's like, I think it really did. I think it saved my life. But
Mm-hmm.
then when it had been several hours after I had been assaulted, and I was laying on my bed, I was cold. I was scared. I was not knowing if I would live or die. And in that moment, I recognized that there was a presence in the room. And it was a presence that I recognized. I couldn't see it, but it felt very sad. And all of a sudden, I knew it was the presence of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
That the Lord was not rejoicing this was happening, but
Yeah.
it was like he was coming beside me and holding my hand.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a comforting presence. And in that moment, fear left me. And I still didn't know if I would live or die. But I knew if I died, I would not have died alone. And it was like a
Mm-hmm.
comforting feeling. And so, you know, I think that when we recognize, you know, I like to use a word picture that kind of maybe puts it in our language, which when my middle daughter was 5 years old and going to kindergarten, I had to take her for her immunizations. And she's there, she's seeing the needle, she's got big crocodile tears, and she's looking up at me, and you can see, it's like, Mom, why are you letting them do this? It's like, stop this, don't
Right.
do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I remember looking down at her, holding her face in my hand. And I said, look into my eyes. I said, Mommy's not going anywhere. I am right here. And I held her hand tightly. And
Mm-hmm.
when we go through hard times, when we go through painful things, it's like the Lord promises and says, he's looking in our eyes saying, look into my eyes. I'm holding you tight. I
Mm-hmm.
am right here and I am not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And just that comfort
Mm-hmm.
is, if you don't know where God was, ask him.
Yeah.
You know, Jacob says there's in the Bible where he wrestled with an angel. The next
Mm-hmm.
morning he said, surely the presence of the Lord was in this place and I didn't even realize it. And
Yeah.
sometimes when we ask ourselves, where's God? You know what? He's in the meal train of people bringing me meals because they know
Yeah.
I need food. He's in
Yeah.
the late night text messages from friends that he's prompting them to say, hey, let her know you're praying for her. Send this
Mm-hmm.
scripture.
Yeah.
Give this financial blessing. So God is all around us.
Yeah. That is such a beautiful truth because he was there.
He
He's always there.
absolutely
He's
was.
always here, even when we don't think we can feel him. He never leaves. And I know in your book you write about the moment you stopped asking why me.
Yeah.
So there was a moment when you stopped asking why me and you started asking what now. And
Mm-hmm.
that's such a holy pivot because that
Mm-hmm.
kind of pivot only comes through surrender and
Right.
trust. What did that shift look like for you, and what can it look
Yeah.
like for someone who's ready to move from victimhood
Yeah.
to purpose, even if their story still feels messy?
Sure. You know, I think the big thing, the why me, is it's okay to ask why me, but we
Mm-hmm.
don't want to get stuck there. That's
Right.
when it becomes a problem. You
Yeah.
know, part of the why me is in the grieving, but there's a time to grieve, but then there's also a time to say, okay, what's next? What
Yeah.
now? And for me, you know, I think part of that is because I am a therapist and I've walked through lots of stories and hurt and brokenness. And from the very beginning, I knew I didn't know what it would take to heal. But I knew I was declaring, I'm going to do whatever it takes, I'm going to heal.
Yeah.
And I had to go down in the very beginning to the Victim Witness Center downtown where the police were, because I would have to write out statements. And every time I went there was a little arrow that would say, victim, sign here. And when I would go to sign my name, something inside me it was like this internal resistance and almost like this anger that said, I will not be a victim. I was victimized. I'm not going to deny I was victimized. I was a victim that day. But after that day, my story changed. I was victimized, but what am I going to do with that? And there's a story in the Bible of a woman that knew pain that was victimized, and that was Naomi. You know, Naomi and her husband leave Bethlehem with their 2 sons who grow up in another land. But while they're in this other land, Naomi's husband and her 2 adult sons die. And so she takes a daughter-in-law back to Bethlehem, and they greet her. The women greet her and say, Naomi, you're here, and they're celebrating. And Naomi looks at them, and she makes a declaration. And she says, from this moment on, do not call me Naomi. My name will be Mara, which means bitter. And she declared that her name would be a representation of the past. And so when I was going through my healing, I knew what my feelings were, and I honored them. I journaled, I wrote, I wept, I cried, I had the why me's. But there was the point where it was like, okay, God, but this isn't the end of my story. And I was not going to have my story be, here's a woman that was hurt. My story was going to be, here was a woman that was hurt, but she ran to Jesus and she found healing. Yeah. And so, looking back to the day in the emergency room, I met with a detective a year later, and she said, Kim, do you remember what you told me in the emergency room? Now, you got to realize, in the emergency room, I was all beat up. I was bloodied. You couldn't recognize my face. And she said, you looked at me in the emergency room and you said, I will not let this experience go to waste. I will be a better therapist because of it. And then my adult daughter said, Mom, do you remember what you told me in the emergency room? And I said, no, there's lots going on that day. No. And she said, Mom, you looked at me and you shook your finger at me and you said, promise me you will not let this make you bitter. And even that same day, after I had been assaulted, and it was before I was kidnapped, my ex-husband, the intoxication was wearing off of him, and he looked down at me and he said, tell me the truth, I've gone too far. He said, you could never forgive me, because our marriage had been marked with forgiveness. And I looked at him and I thought for a moment. I looked up in his face. I called him by name and I said, you're right. You've gone too far. There's no going back, but I want you to know that I will forgive you. Now, that didn't mean I forgave him that day, but that day I declared over myself, I will be a forgiving person. I will not be an angry person. I am not going to live with this the rest of my life. And so I went through a process of having to forgive, having to walk that out, but it began with a choice.
Yeah. And we do have to make that choice, and it's so hard. It's so hard, but until we're able to forgive, we're the ones kept in bondage of that pain. And it holds us in shackles, not them. Right. And we're the one that has to live. We're the one that has to live with that. And I love how when you speak, you pair story with structure and testimony with tangible tools. And I know that's the therapist in you. And I love that. And you also call them tools for growth and healing.
That's right.
Can you share one or two that you've seen make a real difference for people who are ready to begin again? Something simple or practical that someone listening today could actually say, wow, I could use that.
Sure. I think in the back of the book, the first half of the book is where I actually tell my story. But the second half...
We haven't even said the name of your book yet. So if you want, go ahead. Like, I'm just sitting here like this infamous book that Kimberly has written. We haven't even called it by name yet.
Well, let's call it by name. The name of my book is Healing from Life's Deepest Hurts. And then the subtitle is Reclaiming Your Life After Grief, Loss, or Trauma. And so in the second part of the book, they're called Tools for Growth and Healing. There's 10 tools. And for the person that's maybe just starting out in healing, the most important, I think, are the very first ones, which are the power of friendship and community. Because again, we don't want to do things alone. But then the next one is the power of self-care. Because when something hard happens, we feel numb. Sometimes we
Yeah.
don't want to get out of bed. Sometimes just going outside is a huge, it's a huge venture. I don't want to eat. I just want to pretend and I want to make this pain go away. So one of the tools is the power of self-care. And I have a exercise called Fill My Bucket. And there's ideas for days when I have no energy to low energy. And the tool may be, you know what? First of all, stay off social media those days. And it may just be go sit in a chair in the sunlight. It may be something as simple as make sure you're drinking water. Make sure you're having healthy snacks and we're not just having Snickers. So there's also, ideas for medium to high energy days that are going to be more, hey, I'm farther along in my healing, but these are things that are actually going to help me. And this may be, I may go to the gym and actually work out and move my body. It may be, go for a run. Well, on a low energy day, it may be walk to my mailbox. Yeah. So the power of self-care is one of them. Another one is the power of therapy, which as a therapist, I'll say that one of the first things I did is I went to therapy because I believe in it. A therapist isn't going to make you better, but they're going to walk beside you and they're going to help make sure you're making progress. You are healing. They can recognize stuck points. So I've got some questions. Lots of people ask me, well, how do I know who's a good therapist? Where do I go to find a therapist? So I answer those questions in there. Then there's the power of gratitude, because what I focus on, I'm going to find. If I'm looking for something and if I'm thinking, today, kind of like when I'm saying, where is God? Where was God? When I start counting and saying, okay, you know what? My friend came down today unannounced and they sat with me and we shared a laugh. You know what? That was God.
Yeah.
Recently I told my primary doctor, she retired, and I don't even know if she's a believer, but I'd given her a copy of my book and I told her, I said, I want you to know you were the hands and feet of Jesus for me in those first days because you helped me feel safe. And so it's looking at the power of gratitude. There's the power of forgiveness. I've got prayers in there. If you don't know how to even begin, if I don't want to forgive, because most of the time we don't want to forgive. There's prayers and Lord, okay, help me even want to forgive because I don't want to.
Yeah. Can we unpack that just for a moment and what it looks like? Because it's very hard. And sometimes it's not even just at the beginning after a traumatic experience. It could be years later. So we may be talking to someone who has been dealing with a situation in their life. It could be with a parent. It could be with a spouse. It could be with a child or a sibling or a friend, broken relationships that's just not ready to forgive. Can we unpack what that looks like?
Yes. I think, one is I think that when you talk about we're not ready, there's two different things. One is if it's just my feelings, I don't feel like forgiving and I'm not ready, well, you're never going to feel ready. So let me just put that one to ease. Don't wait for a feeling of I just want to forgive. Yeah. But there's also part of working through forgiveness is I had to actually honor my feelings and grieve what had been lost, because I need to know what am I forgiving. So I'm not just going to say, well, I just forgive my parent or my spouse or my friend that hurt me, because it doesn't feel genuine. What exactly am I forgiving? And I need to name that. Hey, this is what was taken from me, or this is how it hurt me. But when I've gone through that and I've allowed myself to grieve that, then there's the part of making a choice. It's not about feelings. It's saying, Lord, I am making a choice to release this person from the obligation to me. It's like, Father, you're the one that is the righteous judge, not me. And I don't want to carry this anymore. And because I love, with my therapy clients, I love talking about forgiveness with unforgiveness is like an umbilical cord. And an umbilical cord is meant to bring life and nutrition and health. But unforgiveness and anger with somebody, first of all, it ties me to them, but it sucks the energy out of me. It sucks the joy out of me. And so the good news is I'm the one that gets to cut the cord
Yeah. And walk free. After you
and
cut that
walk
cord, then you
free.
get to be the one to walk free and learn how to live free again
Yeah, I don't
from
have to
that.
remember it anymore.
Right. And just because I think one of the biggest things for me in my own life is knowing that just because I gave forgiveness and just because I forgive, it doesn't mean that my story isn't real. It doesn't mean that those
Mm-mm.
things didn't happen to me. It just, I'm releasing what was
Yeah.
controlling me. No
Well,
longer does it have that control over me.
it's releasing that I when I'm in unforgiveness, I'm actually saying I can't forgive you until you validate my feelings, so my feelings can never be validated. And so
Yeah.
I'm held hostage.
Yeah.
Whereas when I validate and say my story did matter, my tears did matter, my heart did
Yeah.
matter, and I validate that and I release them, I quit carrying them around with me.
Right.
And it does
How?
not mean we have to be in relationship again. There's
Yeah.
still healthy boundaries. There's still,
Yeah.
and it doesn't mean they're getting away with anything.
Right.
It's you know what? I'm gifting that.
I love my friend Alex Hoover. I was listening to her. She was talking last night. She has a book that she's recently written about offense and letting go of the offense. And I love that we were talking, and she said, walls. We build walls up, and that keeps things out, right? But like boundaries are healthy, and the boundaries that we put up, that's like our protection, right? So it's good to have healthy boundaries, but the walls that we put up, those are the things that
Yeah.
we have to allow those to tear down and that hurt, because it's also keeping good things from being able to come in at that
Yeah.
moment as well. And I love that. And
Yeah.
it's almost like what you just said is like grace meeting grounded action. And
Sure.
I love that.
Why say have
So,
windows instead of walls? Because you think
oh,
of a power window, like these windows
yeah,
where you like barely touch it and it goes all the way up and all the way down,
yeah,
and you like
yeah.
fight with it. When you've got a window, it says I can choose to have it all the way up, but I can also choose to bring it part way down, little way
Yeah,
down. It's more of I can protect myself, but I can also
yeah.
give myself freedom. So it's not a wall that keeps everything out.
That keeps everything out.
Right.
Yeah. And let's talk for a moment about the weight and freedom of forgiveness. So we just talked about forgiveness because that word alone, I know as we've been sitting here talking about it, and some people are probably like flinching right now and they're probably
Yeah.
clenching their jaw. So
Yeah.
if you are clenching your jaw right now, like you're safe in this place, and you can take a deep breath and unclench your jaw and just get back to the present and be centered with us in the right
Yeah.
now. But you did. You said you forgave your ex-husband. I've had to forgive well-meaning people. And I think
Yeah.
we've all had to forgive
Yeah.
well-meaning people
Yeah.
who didn't know how to show up for us. And I'm sure that you had to forgive even people in that time that didn't know how to show up for you.
That's right.
Which part of forgiveness surprised you the most, and what did it teach you about the freedom that we're talking about walking in? And this is so important for me because once anyone has hurt you, we're so desperate to learn how to walk outside of that pain, right? And how not to feel it, but then we don't want to forgive, we don't want to let go,
Right.
and so we are truly just stuck in this cycle. So yeah, what did that teach you?
Yeah, I think the forgiveness that surprised me the most is that the hardest person to forgive was me. And the reason I say that is, I could forgive. I did. I forgave my ex-husband for many things, but I had forgiven him so many times throughout the years. And sometimes it's easier to forgive somebody you love than somebody that you don't love.
Yeah, say
Um,
that again. Yeah.
but the hardest part I recognized is I had been holding things against myself, and I had believed many lies that going back to my divorce. Because when I divorced, I told myself, well, it must have been my fault. I failed God because I had
Yeah.
promised him I'd be married forever. And I didn't, but that's what I told myself. I told myself I had failed my children, that I was a terrible mom because now they were from a broken home. I told myself I had failed as a marriage and family therapist because here I'm helping other people and I can't save my own marriage. And so I'm just going on and I'm telling myself I'm divorced, disqualified, defective, damaged, God can't use me. And so I had to go back and release myself from those expectations and what I was holding and judging against myself.
Yeah.
Then I had to do the same thing with God. God doesn't need our forgiveness, but I had expectations when I'm like, God, you abandoned me. God, you let this happen. You're not supposed to, I'm telling him what he should and shouldn't have done. And I had to release my expectations. And because some of that, if I wasn't careful, if those continued, those put a wall between me and God.
Yeah.
And it's because
Yeah.
of me, not because of God.
Right.
So I had to release my expectations and say, God, this is where I surrender and choose to trust you. And with well-meaning people that had told me through the years, believe, God restores marriages. Yes, he does, but I needed to hear messages of boundaries, and at that time it really wasn't being taught. But I needed to be, how do you protect yourself? And so I needed some balanced messages. So I had to forgive people that I felt like I had stayed in my marriage longer because I didn't want the judgment of other people. So, and sometimes I had to forgive over and over and over again for the same offense. It was like I made a choice to forgive, but man, that next day I could feel the anger. And I had to
Right.
remind myself, you know what? I've made a choice to forgive, and I'm putting that under the blood of Jesus.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'd have to tell myself 20 minutes later, I've made a choice to forgive. I will be a forgiving person, and that's under the blood of Jesus. And eventually, as you do that, it got to the place where I could actually bless those and not blame those that had hurt me.
Yeah. That is so good, because forgiveness isn't just about releasing the other person or releasing the hurt. It's about releasing the weight so you can breathe again, so that you can finally breathe again. And we also talked about isolating, and you've mentioned multiple times in how right after, the very first thing you did was went to your therapist. And I love that. I love that you knew that that was a safety net, that that's a
Yeah.
place that you needed to run to. And so many of us, I think, we walk alone and we suffer in silence. And I think about how many people we even see at the grocery store, right, that walk by
Yeah.
us and smile,
Yeah.
and you may, just how are you, and fine, right?
Yeah.
We're all fine. I'm fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. We're all fine.
Yeah.
And because we don't really know
Right.
what other people are carrying. And so many people suffer alone in silence because of shame, because
Right.
they're afraid, or maybe they're just plain exhausted,
Yeah.
and they're just tired. What would you say to the woman who feels completely alone today in her pain? And how can we as friends or faith communities show up with compassion and wisdom
Yeah.
for those that are hurting?
Yeah. Well, for a woman that feels alone, first of all, there's the part of we're not alone. God is there. But sometimes we need the human hands, we need
Yeah.
the human connection. And so I always say, do people know that you're hurting and alone? Have you asked? Now, I'm not talking about going to the gas station and when they say, "How are you today?" fall apart on them and tell them your story.
Right.
But you know what? When I called my pastor, I didn't have to, and this was even before this. This was when I went through my divorce. I went to my pastor and I just said, and it was a new church at the time. Yeah, I think it was my first Sunday. And I went to the back where you meet the pastor, and the tears began to come. And I said, I'm just hurting. And you know what? They began to help connect me with people that was a
Yeah.
safe place, because safe place is important. You don't want to do this with people that are going to like rally and fuel your frustration and your hurt and your anger.
Yeah, that's
That's
so
why I
important.
love groups like Grief Share, because people are going through different things, but it can be a safe place, and you've got trained leaders.
Yeah.
Whether it's things like divorce care, whether it's celebrate recovery, but we heal in community. So I would say, if you're hurting alone, who's one person you can reach out to? And maybe if you know something specific, like I would call a friend and say, you know what, I don't want to talk, but would you just come sit with me? I actually said, this is what I need.
Sometimes people just need a safe place to land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and when you ask the second part of that is how can we, as a community of believers, how can we, help support somebody who's hurting? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's give up the idea that you've got to go in there and fix it and take the pressure off.
Yeah.
Because people don't do it because they feel awkward. I don't know what to say. I
Mm-hmm.
feel bad. We say things like, well, if you need anything, call me, but you're
Mm-hmm.
not going to get called.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of the things that you can do is one, what are practical things that you can do?
Mm-hmm.
It may be, you know what, I'm running to the store today. Can I pick something up for you? It
Yeah.
may
Yeah.
be, you know what, here's a DoorDash card for you to go get something to eat when you're hungry.
Mm-hmm.
I think my favorite though, and it was actually a gift my dad gave me. And that was, he would give me just the gift of his presence. So I'd sit beside him and I would just weep and cry and he wouldn't say a word. He would just put his hand out and he would squeeze my hand. And he
Mm-hmm.
made this space for it. Or I would call him and I would say, Dad. And he'd say, yes. And then I would just cry and he would just stay on the phone. And he
Yeah.
wasn't saying anything. He wasn't trying to fix it. And so when the phone call was done, I'd say, thanks, Dad. And he
Mm-hmm.
hadn't said anything. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's taking the pressure off that I have to know the right thing to say. And maybe I can say, you know what? I don't know the right thing to say, but I want you to know I'm here. I'm
Yeah.
here.
That is so good. I asked God this year to help me with the art of just listening, to just sit and to listen and to just be a listening ear, because just as much as we need to know we have a safe place to land, sometimes you're right, we just need somebody to listen. And I may not even say anything. You
Yep.
may just be listening to me breathe, but I
Mm-hmm.
just need you to be there with me, like you said, and
Yeah.
to sit alone in silence and to know that, because our
Yeah.
cliches, we wonder why that they leave us empty and feeling broken. Our words can't heal anyway.
Right.
Only the love and the power, the convicting power of the Holy Spirit. He heals. He's our
Yeah.
healer. And but just knowing that you have one person, like you said, that you can just
Mm-hmm.
sit and say, you know what, today I don't need to hear anything. I don't
Yeah.
need you to say anything. You don't even have to share anything.
Yeah.
But will you just sit with me?
Yeah.
And that is absolutely so beautiful. And I think it's a needed reminder.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think you're right, because healing often happens in safe places, and
Yeah.
sometimes those safe places are silent places.
Yeah.
There's
Well,
a
and
need for
sometimes
just a holy hush.
sometimes we don't know what we want.
Yeah.
When I was going back to work after all this happened, my bosses said, what is it that you need? And so I sat down with a piece of pen and paper and thought, what do I need? And I still have the paper. And it said things like, I need to wrap myself in a blanket and cry. I need to take a hot bath. I
Mm-hmm.
need a friend to come by. I need a friend to leave. And so it was sometimes, and it could change from moment to moment, but it was just kind of recognizing what is it that I need and how do I get that need met?
Yeah. For a woman listening who's still deep in the ache of her
Mm-hmm.
story right now, and she's stuck somewhere in between breakdown and breakthrough. And so
Mm-hmm.
she's in that tension, that awkward dance right now of not yet and almost.
Yeah.
What are a few small, tangible steps that she can take toward healing? And maybe not the whole staircase, right? But
Mm-hmm.
just like, what
Mm-hmm.
would be the next right step if you could
Yeah.
give her one word of that today?
You know what? I would tell her it's okay to break down.
Yeah.
It's I'm between breakdown and breakthrough, so I'm trying so hard to get to breakthrough, but sometimes I need to break down.
Yeah.
And sometimes I need to allow my emotions, make space, because there is no cookie cutter on how much time it should take. People
Yeah.
grieve at different rates.
Mm-hmm.
Things heal. People heal at different rates. I think it's just more important that it's just don't stop. Do
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So if it's today I broke down and I'm crying, see that as maybe that's a good thing, and that's a step to my progress. I'm
Right.
breaking down. I'm washing rain. It's like tears can be heaven's rain, washing my spirit, my soul, and it
Right.
refreshes me. And okay, all I need to do is let that pressure out. Now I've got enough strength to do that next requirement. Maybe I have to
Mm-hmm.
take the kids to school. Okay, it's going
Yeah.
to give me just enough space and energy to do just the next right thing. And then I just kind of heal, just make sure it's one step, even if it's little by little. I really focus on it's the little steps. You do enough
Yeah.
little steps, you're going to get there.
You're going to get there.
You're going to get
Yeah.
there.
And that's beautiful because healing isn't about perfection. You
Nope.
just have to participate in it, right?
Be
And
willing.
even the tears and the breakdown days shows us, if anything, that we're allowing ourselves to feel those emotions and we're allowing ourselves to process them. And we're supposed to feel and we're supposed to process.
Well,
And
Randy, Jesus broke down when he
Right?
wept when Lazarus died.
Yes,
every
absolutely.
emotion that we have, Jesus had.
He
He
had,
wept.
yes.
He had sorrow. He wept. He was angry when he overturned, the money changers in the temple. He felt abandoned by his disciples when he asked them, "Hey, stay awake and pray for me." He felt abandoned by God when he said, "God, why have you forsaken me?"
Yeah.
So every feeling we have, don't fight your feelings. Just ask your feelings, what information do you want to give me?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like if I'm feeling abandoned, okay, abandoned, what is it that you need? If I need connection, okay, who's one person I can connect with? If I'm afraid of something, what's fear trying to tell me? Okay, what do I want to do with that? So don't fight your feelings, but just use them for information.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good because I think so many of us think something's wrong with us, right?
Yeah.
Because we can't stop thinking about this, or I can't stop feeling this, or I don't
Yeah.
want to process this, and we try to suppress it. And for us to ever receive healing, and I like to preface that with saying, I don't know that we will ever truly be healed on this side of glory. We're not going to receive true healing until we meet him in the air. But
that's when we'll be whole.
Right, when we'll be whole. But for us to ever even, to walk in it, we have to be able to process. It has to be exposed.
Yeah.
And it's that exposure that we don't want to do, because healing is raw and it's real and it's messy and it's necessary. It's necessary to get real with ourselves and say, you know what? This is what I'm going through, and this is real, and it's okay. And my mind is not betraying me. My body's not betraying me. This is how this is supposed to go. I'm supposed to be able to do this. And I think that once we can get to that point and that acceptance and realization, it's like, oh, okay. Like, I can
I'm
do
doing
this,
what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
If I wasn't having these feelings, if I wasn't grieving, if I wasn't having this loss, maybe that's when something would be wrong with me.
My dog just came in the room and stepped on her grenade toy. So you see her tail wagging behind me. She just blew up the room I'm in. So
this has been so funny, though, because the topic we've been talking about are when life's grenades hit us.
Yeah.
And it's like, the emergency vehicles that's gone by, it's because it's emergencies. It's the helicopters or the airplanes. It's like, okay, this is very metaphoric for what we're going through.
Yes. And that was a military.
Yeah.
That was a military. So it was a Defender plane.
Yeah.
So it's all been very prophetic.
Yes.
Just watching the way God has moved in this.
Yes.
And then she just came in here and stepped on that grenade, and I was like, okay, I see that.
Yeah. If I can, I'd like to share something when you talk about that military plane and the Defender. In Genesis 1, the Bible talks about when the earth was empty and void, the Spirit of the Lord was hovering over, and God's presence was there. And when we go through those hard times where everything feels empty and void, God is there. The Spirit of God is there hovering, and he's covering you. Yeah. He's hovering and covering, and he's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that was really good. That was very needed. That was very needed. As we close, when readers finish healing from life's deepest hurts, what do you hope lingers? And what prayer or truth do you want echoing in their hearts long after they close the last page of your book?
I think what I hope lingers is that they walk away feeling, okay, I'm not alone. that
Yeah.
they read a
Yeah.
story that somebody that said, "Hey, me too." This
Yeah.
is it's like we're
Girl,
linking
me
arms.
too. Yeah.
And it's a little bit like, we circle around each other, but I want them to feel seen and known, and more important, that they're seen by me as an author, that they're seen by God.
Yeah.
So I hope they walk away knowing and desiring that closeness with the Lord, because
Yeah.
it's so available.
Yeah.
The prayer that I hope that they pray, when once they've read the book, the prayer that I want them to have lingering in their heart is, Lord, here I am, breathe life into me.
Yeah.
Just like
Yeah.
I did on that pergola. Here I am, Lord. I don't have words, but I'm here, palms out, open, saying, Lord, breathe life.
Yeah, because that's the kind of hope that doesn't fade. It
That's
grows
right.
roots, right? It
That's
grows
right.
roots. Wow. Yeah, you have just been a beacon of light for me. This conversation has just been absolutely amazing. You've truly been a light in the dark. And before we wrap up, I always finish our chats with a final five.
All right.
I like to call it our little lightning round. So before we wrap up, we always end with our final five, and it's like five simple. Sometimes they're soul deep reflections, sometimes they're quick and
All
witty,
right.
but today just felt a little different.
All right.
And you can just simple answer and just the first thing that comes to
All
your mind.
right.
What is one word you would whisper to yourself on your darkest night?
One word.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I probably whisper strong.
Yeah. Oh, that one was good. That one was good. A scripture that's been your lifeline throughout your journey.
The one you quoted earlier, God is close to the brokenhearted,
Yeah.
and that He heals the crushed spirit.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that's my jam. That's a good one. A rhythm or a small practice that helps you stay grounded when life feels heavy.
I don't know that it's necessarily rhythm. It's more a person, and that's a little bit more when life gets heavy. My husband kind of keeps me grounded. He's the
Yeah.
engineer. That's the calm, cool, collected. When I want to panic and throw.
Yeah.
So I think it's more. But my rhythm is always going to prayer. It's always saying,
Oh,
"Okay, God, I can't do anything with this, so I'm
yeah.
literally giving this to you."
Yeah. Wow. Oh, yeah, that one's good too. What's one thing you sense God inviting you to in your next season?
Stretch.
Yeah. Woo.
He is stretching me. He
Yes.
is he's
You
invite
kind of feel like dough right now. So that's
I
kind of how I feel
do.
like. God is just like
I do.
stretching right now. Yeah.
I keep telling people God is shifting my sails, and I don't quite know where they're going, but
Yeah.
I can feel the stretch and the breeze coming, because I know God's opening doors. Though I am a therapist, I really feel like God is calling me and launching me and birthing something in me, that will be working with women in women's ministries.
Yeah. I love that. And then the last one, if you could have coffee with any woman in the Bible, who would it be and what would be your coffee order?
Mm. I think it would be okay. Let me think for a minute. My first response is Esther.
I always say Esther. Yes. Yeah.
I think of Esther because she felt underqualified, but God had her there for such a time as this. And it's kind of like I'd be going, "You go, girl."
Yeah.
I'd be your
Yeah.
cheerleader. You go,
Yeah.
girl.
Yeah.
Fake it till you make it.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Right? You
so
got
I'd
this.
be like, "Hey, we'd be BFFs," and I'd be,
Yeah.
cheering. I'll keep your secret.
Yeah.
My coffee order would. I'm pretty boring. I really like the black Americano coffee with half and half.
Yeah.
If I'm really stretching myself, it'll be a macchiato, one of those caramel macchiatos with whipped cream.
Macchiatos.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Kim, thank you so much for trusting us with your story. And thank you for being willing and vulnerable enough to tell it and showing us that God doesn't just patch our wounds, but He transformed them into testimonies for His glory.
right.
And I'm just so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for you today. And I
Thank you.
pray that our friends
have had just one word, even if it's just hope, that throughout this conversation that they can hold on to it, they can glean to it and carry it with them to that next step.
Thank you for having me, and I echo that. There
Yeah.
is hope.
Yeah. All right. Until next time, we love you all. Bye. I am so thankful for Kim trusting us with her story and showing us that God doesn't just patch our wounds, but He transforms them into testimonies that all point to His glory. And to all of my friends, all of you that have been listening, if this conversation met you today, if it helped you exhale and whisper, same, or remember that God is still in your story, here's what I would love for you to do for us. Send this episode to a friend who might be walking through her own valley, someone who needs to know she's not alone. And the best way that you can show us love that's absolutely free, leave a quick review on Apple or Spotify. Just a few kind words and your 5 stars help more women find this space where faith meets the fallout and grace rewrites our story. You can also subscribe to my Substack and get weekly rhythms and poetic reflections and grace notes delivered right to your inbox. It's kind of like the podcast keeps breathing between our episodes. And if something stood out to you today, a phrase, a moment, a holy whisper, I would love to hear from you. Tag me on Instagram at Brandy A. Dawson and use the hashtag 8th and Grace so I can see what God's doing in your corner of the world too. My DMs are always open and I love to chat with you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for helping me carry this good gospel. And Kim, once again, thank you, friend. And to everyone listening, may you find courage to believe your story isn't over. Even here, even now, God is still writing resurrection into your pages. Until next time, keep breathing grace. He is who He says He is.